Why did Europe lack investment support for semiconductor companies for a long time before the European Chips Act?
Yeah, I mean, there are two reasons for that, public and private finance. And starting by private finance, EU is a collection of different states, 27 of them, and they all have their individual financial industry. And there is not a European market for financial services. There are different rules when it comes to, insolvency, tax, and so on in all of these countries. That's why there is no integration between financial markets. And integration is what makes financial markets deep enough to finance chips, because chips production is highly capital intensive. If you want to build up a new fab, it's 10 billion or something at least. So you need huge amounts of financing. And the private financing environment in Europe doesn't deliver that kind of finance. If you look at, for example, venture capital funds that can get you more than 1 billion, you have maybe like 15 in Europe, and the US have 120 or something. So this is really the big problem. What the EU is trying to do is to build a common financial markets union, but this is going ahead very slowly. You have it because it touches upon very fundamental legal traditions that you have in the different member states when it comes to tax, when it comes to insolvency, when it comes to all sorts of other things. But it's basically the problem here that we don't have an integrated financial market. China is huge, US is huge, you have huge financial markets, all under the same legislation, and Europe doesn't have that. And when we look at public financing, we see something similar in a way. I mean, first of all, in Europe, the word industrial policy has had a very negative ring to it over the past 30 years or so. The Maastricht Treaty, which led to the euro, but also introduced strict rules on how much debt member states can make. They basically, it was built on the idea that the European economy will be competitive and will grow through the market and not through industrial policy. Basically, what happened is that you have these debt ceilings of the 60%, 3% limit to deficit spending for individual member states that doesn't allow those member states to make huge investments. So basically, by law, industrial policy more or less was forbidden by member states. Of course, you have very strong competition law as well. So the legal infrastructure was tilted against industrial policy. And on the member state level, I mean, at the same time, nothing was built on the EU level to replace that lack of the industrial policy on the member state level. So there is no big European fund that invests in things. Of course, now there is more and more of it, but it's nothing compared to the size of what the US and China are doing. Of course, China has taken an approach of developing infant industries, protecting them, subsidizing them, and so on. This is something Europe hasn't really done in the past 30 years or so. The US, of course, when it comes to chip industry, have always seen it as a strategic industry. They've invested a lot for their development, strategic investment or development agency. They've done a lot there. And this is something Europe lacks, and that's also why my think tank, my institution, we're in favor of building a European sovereignty fund that can then provide more investment in strategic industries on a European level. That and a development of private European financial markets, this should be done to alleviate that, because as it stands now, there are too many barriers for sufficient financing.